Hello, friends. We are very interested to know which cities you are listening to us from, so quickly like and write in the comments where you are from. Also share what shocking stories happened in your city or maybe even with you personally. Subscribe because the next story could be about your city or even your personal drama. Now let's dive into a new exciting story. The morning in the city began quietly. Light broke through the clouds, reflecting in the windows of high-rise buildings. Michael Williams stood at the living room window with a mug of coffee in his hands. Their house in the suburbs was modern. Large windows, light walls, simple furniture. He and Diana spent a long time choosing everything from the sofa to the paintings. This place was their common project, their pride. Michael took a sip of coffee. Today was an important day. At Quantex Systems, a meeting was scheduled with management, and although no one spoke directly, he knew that his promotion to Director of Data Security had already been discussed. For 12 years, he built the department, protecting the company from threats. This was his life, and now, at 38, he was close to his goal. Michael, are you at the window again? Diana's voice, soft, with a slight mockery, came from the kitchen. He turned around. She stood in the doorway, tying her hair. She was wearing a blue dress, simple but appropriate for her job in Quantex's marketing department. Her ability to look perfect even early in the morning always surprised him. I think, he smiled, showing the mug. Coffee? I already drank. Get ready, hero, she approached, straightening the collar of his shirt. Her fingers lingered on the fabric. Don't be late for your meeting. Michael looked into her eyes. There was warmth in them, but there was something else, a slight spark that he couldn't place. Diana has been a little busier in recent weeks. New projects, meetings, presentations. He thought it was because of work. You're right. He put the mug on the windowsill and hugged her. What do you have today? Diana pulled back slightly, adjusting her earrings. Presentation for the client, then meeting with the team. An ordinary day. Ordinary? Michael narrowed his eyes, joking. You are our star. Soon you will be teaching everyone how to sell ideas. She laughed, and her laughter filled the room. Don't exaggerate. But maybe I'll start, if you sign up first. We agreed. He kissed her forehead. Don't forget about dinner. Today I'm cooking. Chef Williams pasta. Diana raised her eyebrows. Then I'll definitely be on time. They talked a little more while Michael collected his briefcase. Diana told about a client who turned out to be boring, and Michael told about an intern who accidentally sent out a letter with a joke to everyone. They laughed, and everything seemed the same as before. Simple and clear. Quantex Systems headquarters stood in the center of the business district. The building was made of glass and metal, with open offices where employees in suits and sneakers walked between conference rooms. Michael walked through the turnstiles, nodded to the guard, and entered the elevator. His department occupied the 15th floor, and every time he entered there, he felt in his place. Good morning, boss, greeted Jake, the analyst sitting at a table with 3 monitors. One of them had a bright screensaver. Morning, Jake. Michael glanced at the screen. When will you start working? This is for inspiration, Jake grinned. Are you ready for your big meeting? Michael nodded, hiding his excitement. Everything is under control. He walked to his office, small but overlooking the city. There were folders with reports on the table and a board with notes hung on the wall. This was his world order, plans, protection. He sat down, opened his laptop, and began to prepare for the meeting. Today, his future could be decided. At lunchtime, Michael went to a cafe on the first floor of the building. Diana was already there, sitting at a table with coffee and a telephone. She looked up as he approached. Have you decided to take a break? She smiled, putting away the phone. We need to eat. He sat down opposite. How was your presentation? Fine. The client is boring, but I managed. She shrugged. And you, ready for your meeting? Yes. Michael took the menu, but looked at her. It's just, it's important. If everything works out, it will be a new level, for both of us. Diana nodded, but her smile was a little tense. I know. You deserve it. They ordered food and talked about small things, about colleagues, about plans for the weekend. But Michael noticed that Diana looked at her phone more often than at him. She answered, joked, but something was wrong. He waved the thought away. Just work, tiredness. Nothing serious. In the evening, Michael prepared dinner. Pasta with sauce, salad, and a bottle of wine. Diana returned home later than usual, but with a smile. It smells amazing. She kicked off her shoes and walked up to him in the kitchen. You're serious. I promised, he turned, holding a spoon with sauce. Try. She tried it and nodded. Chief, this is perfect. They sat down at the table, and dinner was almost as before. They talked about work, laughed at stories from the office. But Michael noticed that Diana sometimes fell silent, looking away. He wanted to ask, but decided not to spoil the evening. Are you okay? He still said as they cleared away the dishes. Of course, she looked at him and smiled. I'm just tired. Tomorrow it will be easier. He nodded, but something in her voice stayed with him. A slight, almost imperceptible feeling that something is wrong. But he drove him away. Everything was fine with them. Home, work, plans, everything they wanted. At the end of the day, Michael lay in bed and looked at the ceiling. Diana was already sleeping next to her. Her breathing was even. He thought about the meeting, about the future, about how far they had come. 12 years at Quantex, 10 years of marriage. They have built a life that many people dream of. And all you need to do is keep moving forward. Together. Tuesday morning started with rain. Drops tapped the windows as Michael Williams prepared breakfast. Toast, scrambled eggs, juice their usual ritual. He loved these moments when the house was quiet, and the day had not yet had time to twist them into the bustle of work. Diana went down to the kitchen, already dressed for work. A dark suit, her hair pulled back into a neat ponytail. She looked collected, but Michael noticed shadows under her eyes. Good morning. He placed a plate of scrambled eggs in front of her. Did you get enough sleep? Diana smiled, but the smile came out tired. More or less. Yesterday, I stayed up late preparing materials for a new project. Again, Michael sat down opposite him, pouring himself some coffee. Aren't you pushing yourself too hard? It's okay, she shrugged, cutting off a piece of toast. There's just a lot to do. New client, you know how it is. Michael nodded, but something in her tone caught his attention. For the past couple of weeks, Diana has been returning home later than usual. He didn't think much of it. Marketing at Quantex was always chaotic, especially when new campaigns were launched. But yesterday she arrived after 10, and he noticed a new pair of earrings in her ears, small, with shiny stones, clearly not from their usual budget. Are the earrings new? He asked, trying to sound casual. Beautiful. Diana touched her ear as if she had just now remembered them. Oh, yes, gift from a client for a successful presentation. Generous client, Michael smiled, but something unpleasant stirred inside. He waved the thought away. Diana had always been open, and he didn't want to turn into someone who looked for trouble in little things. They finished their breakfast, chatting about the weather and plans for the day. Diana mentioned that she had another meeting today, and Michael talked about a new employee in the department who was confusing all the instructions. Everything was as usual, but when Diana left, he found himself staring after her longer than necessary. The morning was in full swing at the Quantex Systems office. Michael entered his department on the 15th floor, where work was already in full swing. His team, a dozen analysts and specialists, discussed yesterday's report. Jake, as always, sat at the monitors, drinking an energy drink. Boss, have you seen the mail? Jake turned to him. Hart wants us to have the presentation ready by Friday. Something about a new project. Frank? Michael frowned, hanging his jacket over the back of his chair. He usually doesn't interfere in our affairs. Frank Hart was his boss, vice president of operations. Charismatic, with a perfect smile and a way of speaking as if everything had already been decided. Michael respected him for his ability to keep the company afloat, but he always felt a little wary. Frank was one of those people who always knew more than he said. Yes, something strange, Jake shrugged. Maybe he wants to show investors how cool we are. We'll see. Michael sat down at the table and opened the laptop. But the thought of Frank remained. He rarely intervened directly in the department's work, and the sudden interest in their projects was unusual. At lunchtime, Michael went down to the cafe on the ground floor, hoping to cross paths with Diana. She was sitting at a corner table, scrolling through something on her phone. A cup of coffee stood nearby, already half empty. Hello, he approached, smiling. Not busy? Oh, Michael, she put the phone down, but not right away, and it hurt him a little. Sit down. How are you? Fine. I just found out that Hart wants a presentation from us. He sat down opposite him, ordering a sandwich. What's new with you? Diana looked at him, and her gaze was slightly absent-minded. Nothing special. I'm working on a new project. Today, I found out that I am being transferred. Are they being translated? Michael froze. Where? At DataStream Solutions, she said calmly, as if it didn't matter. This is a startup associated with Quantex. They want me to head up their marketing. Michael felt something tighten inside him. DataStream? This is Frank's project, right? Yes, Diana nodded, looking into the cup. He thinks I'm suitable. This is a good opportunity. And you? What do you think? He tried to speak evenly, but a slight harshness appeared in his voice. She looked at him, and her eyes were serious. This is a chance, Michael. Bigger budget, more freedom. I couldn't refuse. He nodded, but anxiety grew inside him. DataStream Solutions was a new project that was not talked about much at Quantex, but there were rumors. They said that Frank personally supervised it, investing huge amounts of money in it. And now Diana, his wife, will work there, under Frank's leadership. When did you find out? He asked, trying to understand. A couple of days ago, she shrugged. I didn't want to load you up until it was certain. Michael wanted to say something else, but the waiter brought his order and the moment passed. They talked about small things, but the conversation was tense. Diana looked away more often, and when she left, saying that she had a meeting, Michael remained sitting, looking at the half-eaten sandwich. In the evening, Diana returned home after 9. Michael was in the kitchen, heating up dinner. He heard her throw her bag in the hallway and went out to meet her. Long day, he tried to smile. Very, she looked tired, but there was some kind of nervous energy in her movements. Sorry it's late. Stayed late with the team. It's okay, he returned to the stove. Dinner is ready. Would you like some wine? Yes, that would be great. She sat down at the table, taking off her jacket. She was wearing a new silk blouse that he had never seen before. Another little thing that hurt my eyes. They ate in silence, and the silence was heavier than usual. Michael tried to start a conversation, but Diana answered briefly, as if her thoughts were somewhere else. Finally, he couldn't stand it anymore. Diana, what's going on? He put down his fork, looking at her. You're somehow different. She froze, then looked at him. Michael, I'm just tired. Work, new project. This is all. Is it because of the translation? He leaned closer. You know, you can tell me. No, it's okay. Her voice was firm, but she looked away. It just takes time to get used to it. He wanted to believe it, but something in her words didn't sound right. He remembered the earrings, the blouse, her late returns, and Frank, who was always too close to their lives. If something is wrong, tell me. He took her hand, but it was cold. We're a team, right? Diana smiled, but the smile was forced. Certainly, everything will be fine. She went to bed early, citing fatigue, and Michael remained in the kitchen. He poured himself more wine and looked out the window, where the rain was still pattering on the glass. Something was wrong, and he felt it. Not just work, not just tiredness. Something more. And for the first time in 10 years of marriage, he wasn't sure he knew his wife as well as he thought. The next day in the office, Michael overheard a conversation between two colleagues from marketing. They stood at the coffee machine discussing DataStream. Did you hear that Diana Williams is in charge now? Said one. Frank Lai personally chose her. No wonder, another chuckled. She knows how to make an impression. Michael walked past without stopping, but the words stuck in his head. He returned to his office and closed the door. The rain did not stop for the third day, and the city seemed gray and heavy. Michael Williams sat in his office on the 15th floor of Quantex Systems, staring at his laptop screen. His department was buzzing behind the glass door. Analysts were discussing reports. Someone was laughing at another of Jake's jokes. But Michael was cut off from this noise. His thoughts revolved around Diana. She has been different the last few days. Late returns, new things, evasive answers. Her transfer to DataStream Solutions, Frank Hart's project, only increased his anxiety. He tried to talk to her, but every time he ran into a wall of fatigue and phrases like, "Everything is fine." Michael was not paranoid, but his job finding weak spots, noticing details did not allow him to ignore these signals. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. He didn't want to do this. It was wrong, dirty, but he should have known. Michael opened the program he used to analyze data in the department. It allowed you to check logs, messages, calls, everything that left a digital trace. He never used it for personal purposes. Until today. "Sorry, Diana," he muttered, entering her work email into the system. The morning started as usual. Michael was making coffee while Diana was getting ready for work. She was wearing a new suit, dark gray, with a perfect fit. He noticed her checking her phone while standing in front of the mirror and quickly put it away when he entered the room. "You look like a boss," he said, trying to sound light, and placed the mug in front of her. "Thank you," she smiled, but her gaze was absent-minded. "Today is an important meeting. You need to be on top." With DataStream, he sat down opposite, watching her. "Yes," Diana nodded, taking a sip of coffee. "Frank wants us to present a plan for the next quarter. A lot of work." Michael felt a pang at the mention of Frank. "He seems to have high hopes for you." "That's his style," she shrugged, but her fingers nervously tapped the mug. "Always demands the maximum." "And you're coping," he smiled, but tension was growing inside. "If anything happens, I'm always there." Diana looked at him, and for a second her eyes softened. "I know, Michael. Thank you." They finished breakfast in silence. When Diana left, saying that she would return late, Michael was left alone. He looked at her empty mug and realized that he could no longer just wait. He needed answers. In the office, Michael closed the office door to prevent any distractions. His program ran silently, scanning the data. He started with Diana's work email, nothing personal, just to get an idea of what was going on. Most of the letters were standard, discussions of campaigns, reports, plans. But one letter, sent from a personal address, caught his attention. It was from Frank, with the subject line, "Plans for the evening." Michael froze, looking at the screen. His finger hovered over the key. He didn't want to see this, but it was too late to retreat. He opened the letter. "Diana, meeting at 19 o'clock at the loft. Let's discuss strategy and the rest. F." Short, but the tone was too personal. Michael felt the blood rush to his temples. He checked the other letters. There were few of them, but each one had the same hint. Dinner, meeting after work, let's discuss in an informal setting. He found correspondence where Frank wrote about her transfer to DataStream, promising a great future and support at all levels. Michael leaned back in his chair, trying to breathe evenly. This is not proof yet. Maybe he's exaggerating. But my intuition, honed over years of work, suggested that something was wrong. He decided to check further. He accessed her corporate phone logs, access he had as head of security. Calls, messages, location. Most of the calls were business calls, but a few numbers were repeated too often. One of them belonged to Frank. Late calls, sometimes after midnight. He could not read the messages, they were encrypted, but the facts themselves spoke for themselves. Michael closed his laptop and stared out the window. The rain continued to fall, blurring the city lights. He felt the emptiness growing inside. 10 years of marriage, their home, their plans, it all seemed fragile now. He remembered how Diana looked at him in the morning, her soft smile. Was she sincere, or was it a mask? At lunchtime, he went down to the cafe, but Diana was not there. He sat down at the table, ordered coffee, and tried to collect his thoughts. Maybe he's wrong. Maybe it's just work, and he sees something that isn't there. But the earrings, the blouse, her aloofness, everything added up to one picture. And Frank. Michael always felt something slippery about him, but he never thought that it would affect him personally. He returned to the office and continued. Now he was looking for a connection between Frank and DataStream. He knew the project was important to the company, but the details were closed even to him. Michael found several internal documents that mentioned large investments and new directions. In one of them, Frank wrote about the need to reallocate resources, including personnel. Diana's name was mentioned as a key asset, but he found the worst thing in the draft letter that Frank sent to his assistant. It was marked confidential, but Michael knew how to bypass the protection. The letter referred to a reorganization of the security department and replacement of current management. His name was not mentioned, but Michael understood. It was about him. Frank planned to remove him, and Diana was apparently part of the plan. He felt the floor disappear from under his feet. This was not just betrayal. It was a cold, calculated blow. Frank used Diana to get to him, to his work, to everything he had spent years building. And Diana. She agreed. In the evening, Michael returned home before Diana. He sat in the living room, looking at their wedding photo on the shelf. They were so happy then, 10 years ago. He remembered how they danced at the wedding, how she laughed when he spilled wine on his shirt. Somewhere deep down, he still wanted to believe that it was a mistake. Diana returned after 10, tired, but with a slight smile. She dropped her bag in the hallway and entered the living room. "You're home," she said, taking off her coat. "I thought you'd be late." "I finished early." He looked at her, trying to keep his voice even. "How was your meeting?" "It's okay." She sat down on the sofa, rubbing her neck. Frank was pleased with the plan. "I think we're on the right track." The mention of Frank cut like a knife. Michael clenched his fists, but forced himself to relax. "You spend a lot of time with him." Diana looked at him, and her gaze became wary. "It's work, Michael. He's my boss. You know how it goes." "I know," he nodded, but his voice was colder than he intended. "It's just, you've changed. I see it." She sighed, looking away. "I'm just busy. Don't start, please." "Start?" He leaned closer. "Diana, I'm not blind. Late calls, new things, this translation. What's happening?" Her face tensed, but she quickly pulled herself together. "Nothing happens. You're making it up. I'm tired. I need to sleep." She got up and went upstairs, leaving him alone. Michael watched her leave, feeling something important inside him crumble. He couldn't trust her anymore. And Frank, they worked together against him. That much was clear. Michael didn't sleep that night. He lay next to Diana, listening to her even breathing, but his thoughts did not give him peace. He knew he had to act. His skills, his experience, everything he built at Quantex will now become his weapon. He won't let them destroy his life. But first he must be sure. He will collect more evidence, build a plan. And if they think they can break him, they chose the wrong man. Michael Williams drove to the office, gripping the steering wheel a little tighter than necessary. The last few days have been like a bad dream. Diana's transfer to DataStream, her evasiveness, correspondence with Frank, plans to remove him from Quantex, all this was spinning in my head, giving me no rest. He tried to talk to Diana, but every conversation ended with her tired, "everything is fine," or abrupt departure. Michael felt like his world was falling apart, and the worst part was that he had nothing to prove. In the office, he tried to control himself. His department on the 15th floor worked like clockwork. Analysts prepared reports, interns ran around with questions. Jake, as always, drank energy drink at his monitors. But Michael felt like a stranger. He knew Frank was up to something, and that knowledge poisoned every day. Today, a meeting was scheduled with management. Michael expected to be discussed about his promotion to Director of Data Security. Rumors had been circulating about this for a couple of months, and he was sure that he deserved this position. But after what he learned about Frank, confidence gave way to anxiety. Boss, are you ready? Jake looked into his office, holding a folder. Hart wants you to present our latest report yourself. Frank. Michael looked up from his laptop. Will he be at the meeting? Yeah, Jake shrugged. He said that he wanted to personally evaluate the progress. His words. Michael nodded, but everything tightened inside. Frank rarely appeared at such meetings. His presence meant something was brewing. Fine. Prepare the slides, I'll check them. Jake left and Michael was left alone. He opened the report, but his thoughts were not about the numbers. Frank, Diana, data stream. He had to hold on and not give himself away. If they were planning to remove him, he wouldn't let them do it that easily. Key Quantex figures gathered in a meeting room on the 20th floor. The financial director, the head of marketing, a couple of vice presidents. Frank Hart sat at the head of the table in a perfectly fitting suit, with a smile that seemed both friendly and cold. Michael was the last to enter, nodded to everyone, and sat down opposite Frank. Michael, good to see you. Frank spoke loudly, as if addressing the audience. Your department has always been our pride. I'm looking forward to your presentation. Thank you. Michael opened the laptop, trying not to look Frank in the eye. He knew he was playing, and he wasn't going to play along. The presentation went smoothly. Michael talked about the latest security improvements, how his team stopped several threats, and plans for the next quarter. Everyone listened attentively and asked questions, but Frank was silent, nodding only occasionally. When Michael finished, he expected praise or at least approval. Instead, Frank leaned back in his chair, tapping his pen on the table. Good job, Michael, he said finally, but his tone was oddly neutral. But I think we need more. Innovation. Competitors do not stand still. Maybe we should reconsider some approaches. Michael felt the blood rush to his face. His department was the best in the industry, and Frank knew it. What exactly are the approaches? He asked, trying to sound calm. Well, for example, integration with new projects. Frank smiled, but there was no warmth in his eyes. Data stream, for example. They do interesting things. Maybe your team can learn from them. There was silence in the room. Everyone knew that data stream was Frank's project, and his words sounded like a hint. Michael clenched his fists under the table. My team is ready for any task, he said evenly. If there are specific proposals, I am open. Great, Frank nodded, but his smile became wider, almost mocking. We'll come back to this later. In the meantime, the increase is postponed for now. We need more data, more results. Michael froze. He expected discussion, questions, but not this. It was a blow, public and calculated. He looked at the others, but no one met his gaze. Everyone was silent, as if this had been decided in advance. Got it, he said finally, closing the laptop. I will prepare additional reports. This is the approach. Frank clapped his hands, ending the meeting. Everyone is free. Michael was the last to leave the meeting room, feeling his face burn. Frank didn't just delay his promotion. He undermined his authority in front of everyone, and that was just the beginning. At lunchtime, Michael did not go to the cafe. He remained in the office, closing the door. He needed to think. Frank was playing dirty, and it was obvious now. But why? Why now? Michael remembered a letter he had found in Frank's drafts about reallocating resources and replacing leadership. This was not just a hint. This was the plan. He opened his laptop and started digging deeper. His access as head of security allowed him to see more than others. He was looking for anything related to DataStream and Frank. Most of the documents were standard: budgets, plans, presentations. But one file hidden in a restricted folder made him freeze. This was a contract between DataStream and a third-party company that Michael had never heard of. The amounts were huge, and the wording was vague. Consulting services, technical support. But the most alarming thing was that the contract mentioned the systems that his department was developing. His systems, the ones he created over the years to protect Quantex. And now they seemed to have been used for something else. Michael felt anger boiling inside him. Frank didn't just want him gone. He stole his work, his ideas, and apparently sold them. But to whom? And why? He made a copy of the file and hid it in an encrypted folder. It was risky, but he couldn't stop. He needed proof, and he will find them. In the evening, Diana returned home late, around 11. Michael was sitting in the living room with a glass of wine, looking at the TV where some series was playing. He didn't even follow the plot. When she entered, he turned. "Long day?" he asked, trying not to show his emotions. "Very." Diana kicked off her shoes and collapsed on the sofa. "Frank overwhelmed us with tasks. Sometimes it seems that he wants everything at once." Michael squeezed the glass a little tighter. "Yes, he knows how to push," he said, looking at her. "At the meeting today, he made it clear that my promotion is being postponed." Diana looked at him and her eyes widened. "What? Why?" "I don't know," he shrugged, but his voice was cold. "Maybe he wants me to learn from DataStream." His words. She looked away, and this did not escape his notice. "This is strange," she said quietly, "but maybe he's just testing you." Checking. Michael put the glass on the table. "Diana, he publicly humiliated me, and I know that he uses my developments for something I shouldn't know about." Her face tensed. "Michael, are you starting again? It's just a job. Not look for conspiracy where there is none." "Conspiracy." He leaned closer. "Then explain why you are with him all the time. Late meetings, calls, this translation. What's happening?" Diana stood up, her eyes sparkling. "That's enough, Michael. I'm tired. I work just like you, and I don't have to make excuses for every step." She went upstairs, slamming the bedroom door. Michael was left alone, staring at her empty spot on the couch. He knew she was lying, and he knew that Frank was part of this lie. But now he was sure. This was not just personal. It was a game, and he was the target. The city was shining with lights, and the loft restaurant on the top floor of the skyscraper was filled with people in expensive suits and dresses. The party to celebrate Diana's appointment as vice president of DataStream Solutions was in full swing. Music, laughter, the clinking of glasses, all this created the illusion of a holiday. Michael Williams stood at the bar, whiskey in hand, watching the crowd. His smile was perfect, polished, but inside he felt his heart squeezing. Diana was the center of attention. She stood next to Frank Hart, wearing a black dress that showed off her figure. Her laughter rang out when one of the guests made jokes, and Frank, as always, looked like he owned the whole world. Michael saw him put his hand on Diana's shoulder, and it was like a blow. He knew about their connection. He knew about Frank's plans to remove him from Quantex. He knew that his developments were being used for dubious transactions. Still, standing here pretending everything was fine was excruciating. "Michael, are you hiding?" The voice of Jake, his analyst, pulled him out of his thoughts. Jake walked over with a beer in his hand, swaying slightly. "It's a party. Relax. Just observing." Michael smiled, but his eyes remained cold. "How did you like your evening?" "Great." Jake looked around. "Your wife is a big shot now. You should be proud." Michael squeezed the glass a little tighter. "Yes, she deserved it." He watched as Diana laughed at another of Frank's jokes. She deserved it. This word cuts like a knife. Did she deserve it, knowing that her promotion was part of a plan against him? He remembered their morning conversation when she announced the appointment. The morning was quiet. Michael was making coffee when Diana came down to the kitchen, already dressed for work. Her face was shining, and he immediately realized that something had happened. "I have news," she said, sitting down at the table. "I was appointed vice president of DataStream." Michael froze, holding his mug. "Vice president? When?" "We decided yesterday," she smiled, but her gaze was cautious. "Frank said I was perfect." "This is a big step, Michael." He forced himself to nod. "Congratulations. This is great." "Thank you." She looked at him, and for a second her smile wavered. "There will be a party today. Will you come?" "Of course," he said, although everything was boiling inside. "This is your day." They talked a little more, but the conversation was tense. Diana went to work, and Michael was left alone, looking at her empty mug. Vice President under Frank's leadership. This was not just a career leap. This was a sign that their plan was moving forward, and he, Michael, was the odd one out. At the party, he kept his distance. Guests came up and congratulated him on his wife's success, and he responded politely but distantly. Frank gave a speech praising Diana, her talent, her unique approach. Michael listened, standing against the wall, and felt a cold rage growing in his chest. Frank talked about the future of DataStream, about new horizons, but Michael knew that this future was built on his work, on his systems, which Frank had appropriated. Diana caught his eye from across the room and walked over, holding a glass of champagne. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice soft but with slight concern. "Everything is fine," Michael smiled, but his eyes were empty. "You are shining. Everyone only talks about you." "Thank you," she touched his hand, but he barely pulled away. "It means a lot that you're here." "I wouldn't miss it," he said, and it was true. He should have been here. I should have seen their faces, their confidence. This fueled his determination. "Michael, she began, but one of the guests called her, and she left, throwing him an apologetic smile. He looked after her, and at that moment everything became clear. He couldn't be a victim anymore. He couldn't wait for Frank and Diana to destroy his life. He had to act, and he knew how. Late at night, after the party was over, Michael returned home alone. Diana stayed to discuss the details with Frank and the team. He didn't mind. He needed time. He sat down at his desk in his office, opened his laptop, and took a deep breath. This was the moment he crossed the line. There was no turning back anymore. He called it Operation Phoenix. The idea came back at the party when he looked at Frank at his smug smile. Phoenix is a bird that rises from the ashes. Michael felt like his life was burning, but he wouldn't let it turn to ash. He uses his skills, his knowledge, to gather evidence and expose them. Frank, Diana, everyone who was part of this. He started simple. I created an encrypted folder where I will put everything I find. Then I set up a monitoring program. It will monitor correspondence, calls, documents related to Frank and DataStream. He knew how to do it without being noticed. His work at Quantex taught him to be invisible when needed. "Do you think I'll break?" he muttered, looking at the screen. "Let's see." He remembered Diana's face at the party, her smile, her touch. Part of him still wanted to believe that she didn't know what she was getting into. But the other part, the one that saw her calls with Frank, her lies, knew the truth. She chose a side, and this is not his side. The next day, Michael came to the office before everyone else. He felt strangely calm, as if the storm inside had calmed down, leaving only a clear goal. Jake, as usual, was the first to notice him. "Boss, you look cheerful," he said, putting the energy drink on the table. "Did something happen?" "Just a good day," Michael smiled, but his eyes were cold. "There is a job for you. Need to check some old DataStream reports. Find everything related to their financing." "DataStream?" Jake raised his eyebrows. "This is Hart's project. Why do we need this?" "Just curious," Michael shrugged. "I want to be in the know." Jake nodded without asking questions. Michael knew he could count on him, but he won't go into detail. This is his war, and he will fight it himself. At lunchtime, he met Diana in a cafe on the ground floor. She looked tired but happy. She clearly liked her new position. "How was yesterday?" he asked, stirring his coffee. "Did you discuss it for a long time?" "Until midnight," she sighed, but her eyes sparkled. "Frank wants to move quickly. We have big plans." "Frank," Michael repeated the name, looking into her eyes. "He seems to expect a lot from you." "Yes," she nodded, not noticing his tone, "but it's worth it. This is a chance to change everything." Michael smiled, but inside he was seething. Change everything. She didn't even suspect that he had already started. Operation Phoenix has been launched, and he won't stop until he knows the whole truth, and until he makes them pay. "I'm glad for you," he said, raising his cup, "for your big plans." She smiled, and for a second it seemed to him that she was the old Diana. But he knew it was an illusion, and he won't believe in her anymore. At night, he worked in his office while the house slept. His program had already begun collecting data: Frank's correspondence, strange money transfers, documents with signatures of people he didn't know. The night was quiet, and Michael Williams's house was in darkness, except for one corner, his office. The light from the monitor reflected in his eyes as he worked. There was an empty coffee mug on the table, and outside the window the city was sleeping. Michael didn't sleep. After the party where Diana was announced as vice president of DataStream, he could not afford to rest. He launched Operation Phoenix, and now every minute counted. He knew that Frank Hart and Diana were working against him. Correspondence, calls, documents, everything pointed to their plan to remove him from Quantex and use his developments for something dirty. Michael wasn't going to give up. His skills, his experience in data protection became his weapon. He was building a trap, and it had to be perfect. "Let's get started," he muttered, opening his laptop. The morning started with the usual routine. Michael was preparing breakfast while Diana was getting ready for work. She looked as always collected, confident, but her smile seemed alien to him. "Is it late again today?" he asked, placing a plate of omelet in front of her. "Most likely," Diana shrugged, checking her phone. "Lots of things to do. Frank wants to speed up the launch of a new campaign." Michael nodded, hiding his irritation. Frank. His name sounded too often in their house. "Good luck," he said, but his voice was flat, without warmth. "Thank you." She looked at him, but quickly looked away. "And you? What do you have?" "An ordinary day," he lied. "Reports, meetings, nothing new." They finished eating in silence, and Diana left, kissing him on the cheek. Michael watched her get into the car and felt a chill growing inside. He no longer saw her as his wife. She was part of the game, and he should have done better. At the Quantex office, Michael locked himself in his office. His department worked as usual. Jake joked, analysts sorted data, interns asked questions. But Michael was in another world. He opened a program that he had written in the first years of work, a tool for tracking activity on a corporate network. She was invisible, like a shadow, and he was going to use her against Frank. First of all, he set up monitoring of financial transactions. He knew that Frank was involved in large transfers through DataStream, and he wanted to understand where the money was going. The program began collecting data: amounts, dates, company names. Most of the transactions looked standard, but a few translations caught his attention. The money went into the accounts of companies he had never heard of, with addresses in offshore zones. This was the first hint of something illegal. "Interesting," Michael muttered, saving the data into an encrypted folder. He couldn't work only from the office, it was too risky. If Frank suspects he's being tested, Michael will lose everything. He decided to create a safe space. At home, in his office, he set up a server that would work through a network of anonymous nodes. It was like a tunnel through which his actions could not be traced. He used an old laptop that was not tied to Quantex to do this, and installed several layers of protection. Even if someone tries to find him, they will only see emptiness. At lunch, he met Jake in the cafe on the ground floor. Jake, as always, was full of energy, despite the early hour. "Boss, are you a spy now?" he joked as he saw Michael checking his phone. Always in action. "Just busy," Michael smiled, but his thoughts were far away. "Did you find anything on DataStream?" "Nothing special yet," Jake shrugged. "Lots of money, few details. But I'm digging. Why do you need this?" Curiosity. Michael looked into his eyes. "Just keep me posted, and don't tell anyone." "Got it," Jake nodded, but his gaze became more serious. "Are you okay, boss?" "Everything is fine," Michael lied. "I just want to be one step ahead." They talked some more, but Michael was distracted. He thought about his program, about the data it collected. He had to be careful. One wrong move and Frank will find out, and this will be the end. In the evening, Diana returned home after 10. Michael was in the living room, drinking a glass of wine, pretending to watch the news. She looked tired but content, as if her new role gave her strength. "Long day?" he asked without looking up from the screen. Very. She kicked off her shoes and sat down on the sofa. But everything is going according to plan. Frank is happy. Michael squeezed his glass. I'm glad for you, he said, but his voice was cold. You seem to get along great with him. Diana looked at him, her eyes narrowed. Michael, what is that tone? I work just like you. Don't start again. I'm not starting, he turned to her. I'm just noticing. You spend a lot of time with Frank. This catches your eye. This is my job, she stood up, her voice becoming sharper. If you don't like it, say it straight. But don't make an enemy out of me. Enemy? He also stood up, looking into her eyes. Diana, I just want the truth. What's happening? She was silent for a few seconds, then shook her head. You're paranoid. I need to sleep. She went upstairs, and Michael was left alone. He knew she was lying, and he knew that the program was already working, collecting pieces of their lies. He returned to his office and opened his laptop. Data came in, transfers, correspondence, names. He found one message from Frank sent to an unknown address. It mentioned partners and new channels. This was not direct evidence, but it was a hint of a connection with someone outside of Quantex, perhaps with people who shouldn't be part of the business. At night, Michael worked until 3 in the morning. He set up the program to automatically save everything to his secure storage. He added filters to highlight suspicious transactions and wrote a script that would alert him if someone tried to track his activities. It was a deceptively calm morning at the Quantex Systems office. Michael Williams entered his department on the 15th floor, nodding to his team. The analysts were working at their monitors, Jake was drinking an energy drink as usual, and the air smelled of coffee and paper. But Michael felt the tension. After the launch of Operation Phoenix, he lived in constant readiness. His program collected data on the financial fraud of Frank Hart, and the first results were already in an encrypted folder. He knew that Frank and Diana would not sit idly by, and he was right. Last night, he noticed his colleagues whispering to each other, avoiding his gaze. In the cafe, someone from marketing fell silent when he approached. And in the morning, in the elevator, two managers talked about paranoia and instability in the security department. They didn't mention his name, but Michael knew it was about him. Frank started his game. Good morning, boss, Jake greeted him with his usual grin, but there was a flash of alarm in his eyes. Did you hear? Conversations. Which? Michael sat down at the table, opening his laptop. He knew, but he wanted to hear from Jake. Well, Jake lowered his voice. People are saying that you put too much pressure on the team. Like, you see threats where there are none. Someone even said that you check other people's correspondence. Michael clenched his jaw. It was a low blow. Frank and Diana weren't just trying to get him out of the way, they were trying to destroy his reputation. And who says this? He asked, looking into Jake's eyes. I don't know exactly, Jake shrugged, but rumors come from above. Maybe from Hart, or from his team. Michael nodded, hiding his anger. Diana. She knew how much he valued his department, his reputation, and yet she helped Frank. Thank you for telling me, he said evenly. Don't pay attention, it's just noise. Jake left and Michael was left alone. He felt the walls closing in. The rumors weren't just gossip, they were a way to isolate him, to make his colleagues doubtful. But he wasn't about to panic. He was ready. At lunchtime, Michael went down to the cafe, but Diana was not there. He sat down at the table, ordered coffee, and opened the phone. His program ran smoothly, collecting data on Frank's transfers. He found several more suspicious transactions. Money went to the accounts of companies associated with offshore companies. In one of the letters, Frank mentioned partners who were ready for the next stage. It was a hint of something more than just business. Michael decided it was time to make the first move. He couldn't attack directly, it would be too risky. But he could sow doubt, as Frank and Diana did. He chose a niche news site known for investigative tech research. Using an anonymous account, he sent them an excerpt from the data. Several translations, company names, a hint of a connection with DataStream. Nothing to indicate it, but enough to attract attention. Let's see how you like it, he muttered, pressing send. He knew this was just the beginning. The site was not large, but journalists could start digging. And where they dig, they always find something. In the evening, there was an unscheduled meeting in the office. Frank convened department heads to discuss strategic changes. Michael entered the meeting room last, feeling eyes on him. Frank stood at the head of the table, confident as always, with a perfect smile. "Michael, glad you're here," he said, but his tone was too sweet. "We need to talk about your department." "What exactly?" Michael sat down, keeping his back straight. He knew it was a trap. "There is an opinion," Frank paused, looking at the others, "that your team is going too far with security measures. This slows down projects. For example, DataStream complains about redundant checks." Michael felt the blood rush to his face. It was a direct attack. "My checks protect the company," he said coldly. "If DataStream wants to take risks, that's their choice. But I won't sign up for this." The room became quiet. Someone coughed. Frank smiled wider. "Nobody talks about risks, Michael. Just, maybe you got too carried away. Rumors are going around that you see threats everywhere." "Rumors?" Michael looked into his eyes. "I wonder who distributes them." Frank didn't answer, but his gaze became harder. "We just want everything to run smoothly. Think about it." The meeting ended and Michael walked out, feeling anger boiling inside. Frank didn't just undermine his authority, he did it publicly, with pleasure. And Diana, apparently, was part of this. She knew how important his work was to him, and yet she supported Frank. Diana returned home late, around 11. Michael sat in the living room, laptop on his lap. He saw how his letter to the media was read. The site requested additional data. It was a small step, but it worked. "Are you still awake?" Diana dropped her bag and sat on the sofa, rubbing her temples. "Long day, no longer than yours." Michael closed the laptop, looking at her. "How is the vice president doing?" "Okay," she shrugged, but her voice was tired. "A lot of work. Frank wants everything to be perfect." "Frank," Michael repeated the name, and his tone was colder than he intended. "He did a good job today. I told everyone that I was paranoid and was slowing down the company." Diana froze, then looked at him. "He didn't say that. You're exaggerating." "Am I exaggerating?" Michael stood up. His voice became sharper. "Diana, I'm not blind. You and him are spreading rumors. Do you think I won't notice?" "Rumors." She also stood up. Her eyes sparkled. "Michael, you're the one complicating everything. I work just like you, and I'm not your enemy. Then why are you silent?" He stepped closer. "You know what he does. You know he's using my work, and still with him." "Enough," she almost screamed. "You see conspiracies where there are none. I'm tired of this." She went upstairs, slamming the door. Michael was left alone, clenching his fists. He knew she was lying, and he knew that his move in the media was just the beginning. He returned to the laptop and checked the data. His program found another email from Frank where he discussed meeting with partners and accelerating transactions. This was another link in the chain. He sent a new batch of data to the same news site, adding an anonymous message. "Check DataStream accounts. There's a lot to find there." He didn't expect immediate results, but he knew it would work. The city was buried in the pre-dawn haze, and Michael Williams's office was the only illuminated window in their house. He sat at his laptop, checking the data collected by Operation Phoenix. His program worked flawlessly, intercepting Frank Hart's correspondence and recording suspicious transfers. The first leak to niche media has already caused a slight buzz. A couple of articles mentioned DataStream, asking questions about funding. It was a small step, but Michael knew he was playing with fire. Frank is not one to forgive. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes. Fatigue was setting in, but there was no time to sleep. Every day brought new evidence. Names, amounts, addresses of companies that looked like dummies. He felt like he was close to something big, but the risk was growing by the minute. If Frank suspects him, everything will fall apart. "A little more," he muttered, opening a new window with logs. The morning began with a tense conversation. Diana sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through her tablet. Her face was tense, and Michael noticed how she quickly removed the screen as he entered. "Good morning," he said, pouring coffee. "What are you reading?" "Nothing special," she shrugged, but her voice was cold. "News." Michael sat across from her, watching her. In recent days, she has been even more distant. After their fight about the rumors, she barely spoke to him, leaving early and returning late. He knew that she was with Frank, and this knowledge burned him from the inside. "Anything interesting?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "Just work." She looked at him, and her eyes were wary. "And you? Still looking for conspiracies?" Michael squeezed the mug. "I'm just doing my job, Diana." "So are you." She snorted, standing up. "Then do it silently. I'm tired of your hints." She left, leaving him alone. Michael looked at her empty space and felt anger mixed with pain. He didn't want to believe that she had gone that far, but the facts spoke for themselves. She was with Frank, and they both wanted to destroy him. At the Quantex office, Michael immediately noticed a change. His command was quieter than usual. Jake, always ready to joke, looked more serious, and a couple of analysts avoided his gaze. When he entered the office, Jake followed him and closed the door. "Boss, we have a problem," he said, lowering his voice. "Yesterday, someone tried to get into our system. I noticed strange queries in the logs." Michael froze. "Who?" "I don't know," Jake shook his head. "But this is not a newcomer. They knew what to look for. I blocked them, but it was close." Michael felt a chill run down his spine. This was not a random hack. It was Frank. He hired someone to track down the leaks, and they were close to finding it. "Okay," he said, trying to remain calm. "Increase your defense, and don't tell anyone." "Got it," Jake nodded, but his gaze was alarmed. "Are you sure everything is under control?" "Yes," Michael lied. "Just keep your eyes open." After Jake left, Michael closed the door and opened his laptop. His program showed that someone was actually trying to access his servers. They didn't get to the data, but the tracks were alarming. He was a professional, and he worked quickly. "Damn," Michael muttered, running diagnostics. He realized that his current system was vulnerable. If Frank hired a hacker, sooner or later he would find his trail. Michael should have acted faster. He decided to redirect all his operations through several intermediate servers' proxies that would make him invisible. It was like hiding behind mirrors. Even if someone looked, they would only see reflections. He spent an hour setting up a chain of servers across different countries. His old laptop, which he used at home, now acted as a control center, transmitting data through encrypted tunnels. It would slow him down, but safety was more important. He couldn't let Frank catch him. At lunchtime, he stayed in the office, checking the new data. His program intercepted another letter from Frank, sent to an unknown address. It mentioned partners and accelerating transactions and the phrase, "Leaks must be stopped. Find the source." This confirmed his suspicions. Frank knew about the leaks and was in a panic. Michael smiled, but the smile was bitter. He was on the edge, but so far he was ahead of them. He sent another batch of data to the same news site, adding details about suspicious transfers. This time he was more careful, using a new anonymous account and sending the message through a secure channel. If the journalists start digging, Frank will get hot. In the evening, he returned home before Diana. She came in around 10, leaving her bag in the hallway. Her face was tense, and Michael noticed how she clutched the phone before putting it in her pocket. "Hard day?" he asked, sitting in the living room with a glass of wine. "That's not the right word," she sighed, taking off her jacket. "Problems with the project. Someone is spreading rumors about DataStream." Michael raised his eyebrows, hiding his satisfaction. "Rumors? Which?" "Nonsense." She sat down on the sofa, rubbing her temples. "It's as if we are connected with some shady companies." Frank is furious. He thinks it's a competitor. "Interesting." Michael took a sip of wine, looking into her eyes. "Maybe someone just knows the truth." Diana froze, then looked at him. "What do you want to say?" "Nothing," he shrugged, but his voice was cold. It's just strange that rumors appear when everything is going so well. Michael, that's enough. Her voice became sharper. Are you on your own again? This is my work, my life. Stop ruining everything. Spoil. He stood up, his eyes narrowed. Diana, I'm trying to understand what's going on. You and Frank, you're both against me. Do you think I don't see? You're crazy. She also stood up. Her face turned pale. I'm not against you. I'm just doing my job. Then why are you lying? He stepped closer. Why are you with him? Why do you want to remove me? She was silent, her lips trembled. Then she turned around and went upstairs, slamming the door. Michael was left alone, feeling his heart pounding. He knew he had gone too far, but it was necessary. He had to keep them on their toes while his plan worked. The darkness in Michael Williams' office was only cleared by the light of the monitor. It was 2 o'clock in the morning and the house was silent, but he couldn't stop. Operation Phoenix was gaining momentum. His program intercepted more and more data, transfers, letters, calls. Each piece of information was like a puzzle, and Michael felt that the picture was almost complete. Frank Hart and Diana, his wife, were up to their necks in mud, and he was going to bring it to light. The last few days have been tense. Rumors of his paranoia spread throughout Quantex, and a hacker hired by Frank almost got to his system. But Michael redirected his servers through a chain of proxies, and now he was invisible. He knew Frank was panicking. Leaks in niche media had already raised questions, and pressure was growing on DataStream. Michael was one step ahead, and this gave him strength. He opened a new letter intercepted by his program. It was from Frank, sent to Diana from a personal account. Michael clenched his jaw as he read, Diana, everything is under control. The partners are ready for the next tranche. The main thing is to keep everything quiet. Williams is becoming a problem. We need to speed up the plan. Michael felt the blood pounding in his temples. Williams is it. They didn't just want him out of Quantex. They were planning something bigger, and the word tranche hinted at money laundering. He dug deeper, checking the attachments. There was a document with details of the transfer. Millions of dollars, disguised as consulting services, went to offshore accounts. The company names matched those of our policing data stream. Here it is, he whispered, saving the file into an encrypted folder. This was not just proof, it was a bomb. If he plays his cards right, Frank and Diana won't be able to get away with it. The morning began with the usual silence. Diana sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone. She looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes. Michael placed the coffee in front of her, watching her reaction. Thank you, she said without looking up. You're early today. Business. He sat down opposite, holding his mug. And you? Looks like DataStream is wearing you out. A little, she shrugged, but her fingers nervously squeezed the phone. A lot of things. Frank. He demands results. Michael resisted the urge to say something harsh. Instead, he smiled. Frank knows how to push. But you can handle it. Vice President, after all. She looked at him, her eyes wary. Michael, what is that tone? If you have problems, speak up directly. Problems? He took a sip of coffee without looking away. Just wondering. You and Frank work so closely. Probably a lot of secrets. Diana tensed, but quickly pulled herself together. This is work, and I'm tired of your hints. Enough. She got up and left, leaving him alone. Michael watched her go, feeling pain mixed with determination. She was lying. He saw it in her eyes, in her gestures. And now he had proof. The atmosphere in the Quantex office was heavy. Rumors about his instability still circulated, but Michael remained calm. He knew Frank was trying to isolate him, but it only spurred him on. In his office, he checked the new data. His program intercepted another correspondence between Frank and Diana. In one of the messages, Diana wrote, "If he continues to dig, it will become a problem. We need to act faster." Frank's answer was short, "We'll do it. He won't make it." Michael clenched his fists. They knew he was close, but they didn't know how much. He decided it was time to up the ante. Niche media was a good start, but its reach was limited. He needed someone bigger who would get real attention. He chose a well-known publication specializing in corporate scandals. Under an anonymous account, through a secure channel, he sent a package of data, excerpts from correspondence between Frank and Diana, details of transfers, names of offshore companies. He added a short message: DataStream launders money through shell companies. Check your accounts. It was risky, but Michael knew there was no other way. "We'll see how you get out of this," he muttered, pressing send. At lunch, he noticed his colleagues whispering in a cafe. One of the managers mentioned an article on the internet where DataStream was called a dubious project. Michael pretended not to listen, but inside he was jubilant. His plan worked. Journalists started digging, and that was just the beginning. He met Jake in the hallway. He looked alarmed. "Boss, have you seen the news?" he asked, lowering his voice. "They write all sorts of things about DataStream. Is this related to you?" Michael looked into his eyes. "I don't know what you're talking about, but keep your ears open, and don't tell anyone." "Got it," Jake nodded, but his gaze was full of questions. Michael returned to the office, feeling the adrenaline pumping into his blood. He was on the edge, but it was his choice. He was ahead of Frank and Diana, and they were starting to feel it. In the evening, Diana returned home earlier than usual. She walked into the living room, where Michael was watching the news on TV. Her face was pale, and her movements were abrupt. "Did you see this?" she asked, throwing the phone on the table. On the screen was an article with the headline, "DataStream under attack, questions about financing." "Interesting." Michael looked at her, remaining calm. "It looks like someone is digging for your project." "This is not funny, Michael." Her voice trembled. "This could destroy everything. Frank is furious. He thinks it's someone from inside." "From inside?" He raised his eyebrows. "Maybe someone knows more than you think." Diana froze, her eyes narrowed. "Do you know something? If this is you." He stood up, looking into her eyes. "Diana, I'm just doing my job. And you, what are you hiding?" "Nothing," she almost screamed. "You're ruining everything, Michael? This is my career, my life." "Your life?" His voice became cold. "What about ours? Or have you forgotten that we were together?" She was silent, her lips trembled. Then she turned around and went upstairs, slamming the door. Michael looked after her, feeling his heart clench. He had loved her once, but now he saw only an enemy, and he won't stop. At night, he checked his mail. The publication responded. They received the data and began an investigation. Michael knew that soon the articles would appear in major media outlets, and then Frank and Diana would have nowhere to run. The rain returned, hammering on the windows of Michael Williams' house. He sat in the living room, in the twilight, with a glass of whiskey in his hand. The TV was turned off, and the silence was oppressive. His laptop lay closed on the table, but Michael knew that Operation Phoenix was running non-stop. The correspondence between Frank and Diana, their plans for money laundering, leaks to the media, everything went according to plan. Major publications picked up the DataStream story, and public outcry grew. Frank was in a panic. Diana was on the verge of a breakdown. Michael should have been happy, but instead he felt empty. He looked at their wedding photo on the shelf. He and Diana smiled as they stood under the arch of white flowers. 10 years ago. Then everything was simple. They loved each other, made plans, and dreamed about the future. Now it seemed like someone else's life. Michael took a sip of whiskey, feeling the warmth spread through his chest, but it could not dull the pain. Diana's betrayal was not just a blow, it destroyed everything he believed in. He closed his eyes, and the memories came flooding back. Their first meeting was in a cafe when she spilled coffee on his shirt and laughed and apologized. Their trip to the lake, where they sat around the fire half the night, talking about little things. Their first home, a cramped apartment where they argued about what color to choose for the walls. These moments were real. Then she was his Diana. Where did he go wrong? When did she become the one who lies, who stands next to Frank, planning to destroy him? The morning was gray. Michael prepared breakfast, but did it mechanically. Diana went down to the kitchen, dressed for work, but her face was pale and her eyes were red, as if she had not slept. "Coffee?" he asked, putting the mug on the table. "No, thank you." She sat down, looking at the phone. Her fingers trembled, and Michael saw her quickly remove the screen as he looked. "Everything is fine." He sat down opposite, watching her. "You look tired." "This is work." Her voice was hoarse. "Everything is falling apart. Articles, rumors. Frank says that someone is drowning us on purpose." Michael clenched his jaw. He knew who it was, but her words still cut. "It's a pity," he said, trying to sound indifferent. "I guess the truth always comes out." Diana looked at him, and her eyes were full of pain. "Michael, why are you doing this to me? I'm trying to keep everything under control, and you're making it worse." "Worse?" He leaned closer. His voice became colder. "Diana, I just live my life. And you, what are you doing with Frank?" "Enough." She slammed her palm on the table. "I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm working so that we have a future. Why can't you understand this?" "Future?" He stood up, looking into her eyes. "What is the future, Diana? The one where you are with him and I am nobody. Don't lie to me." She froze, her lips trembling. For a second, he thought she would tell the truth, but she just shook her head. "You're unbearable," she whispered and left, slamming the door. Michael was left alone, feeling his heart clench. He wanted to scream. He wanted to grab her by the shoulders and ask why she was doing this to him. But he knew the answer. She chose Frank, she chose money, power, and now he had to accept it. The atmosphere in the Quantex office was like before a storm. Colleagues avoided him, whispering behind his back. Rumors about his paranoia were still circulating, but now they were joined by talk about DataStream. Michael overheard two managers discussing an article that mentioned offshore accounts. They didn't know it was his doing, but their fear was palpable. Jake walked into his office, closing the door. "Boss, have you seen the news?" he asked, lowering his voice. "DataStream is sinking. They say there are millions spinning around there. I don't know where." "I heard," Michael nodded, looking at the screen. "I wonder who dug it up." Jake looked at him suspiciously. "You know more than you say, right?" "Just doing my job," Michael smiled, but his eyes were cold. "Monitor the system. If something is strange, tell me right away." "Got it." Jake left, but his gaze was full of questions. Michael opened the laptop and checked the new data. His program intercepted another letter from Frank, where he demanded to strengthen security and clean up traces. This confirmed that they were panicking. Michael sent fresh evidence to the same publication, adding details about the latest transfer. He knew it would explode soon. But even success did not bring relief. He thought about Diana, about her words in the morning. "I'm working so we can have a future." Was there any truth to this? Or is this just another lie? He remembered how she looked at him at their wedding, how she promised to always be there. These memories were like a knife, but he could not push them away. In the evening, he returned home before Diana. He sat in the living room, looking at old photographs of them. One of them is their trip to the mountains, where they stood hugging each other against the backdrop of the sunset. He remembered how she laughed when he slipped on the path, how they warmed themselves by the fireplace in the house. Then he thought they were forever. Now he saw only her betrayal. Diana returned after 10, tired and tense. She stopped in the doorway, looking at him. "Are you still awake?" she asked quietly. "I can't sleep." He looked at her, holding the photograph. "Remember this?" She walked over, looking at the photo. Her face softened, but only for a second. It was a long time ago. "Yes," he nodded, his voice hoarse. "We were different then. Or just me." "Michael, don't start." She turned away, but he noticed how her eyes flashed. "I don't want to quarrel. And I want to understand." He stood up, stepping towards her. "Why, Diana? Why are you with him? Why did you choose this?" She was silent, looking at the floor. Then she looked up, and there was a mixture of pain and anger in her eyes. "You don't understand. It's not that simple. I wanted more. For us." "For us?" He almost laughed, but the laughter was bitter. Don't lie. You wanted this for yourself. And Frank gave you everything right, and I became redundant. Stop it, her voice broke. You don't know how it was. I didn't mean to hurt you. But you hurt. He looked into her eyes, and his voice became quieter. And now I have to live with it. Diana turned away, her shoulders shaking. She went upstairs without saying another word. Michael looked after her, feeling like something inside was breaking. He loved her, even now, but that love was poison. He couldn't go back. Not after what she did. Michael Williams entered his office on the 15th floor, feeling the air thicken. His Operation Phoenix worked flawlessly. Correspondence between Frank Hart and Diana, evidence of their financial fraud, leaks in the media, all this hit data stream like a hammer. Major publications published articles calling the project a shady scheme, and rumors of an FBI investigation were already circulating in the hallways. Michael was one step ahead, but knew that Frank and Diana would not go down without a fight. Today, he felt, they were preparing something serious. He sat down at the table, opening his laptop. His program continued to collect data, and last night he intercepted a new letter from Frank. It was short but ominous. Williams is the problem. It's time to finish. Let's blame him. Michael clenched his jaw. They were going to pin leaks on him, destroy his reputation once and for all. But he was ready. His trap was almost complete, and he wouldn't give them a chance. Let them try, he muttered, checking the encrypted files. It was a rough morning at home. Diana barely looked at him as they ate breakfast. Her face was pale, her eyes were red from lack of sleep. She sat clutching the phone, and Michael noticed how her fingers were shaking. Coffee? He asked, placing the mug in front of her. I don't want to. She pushed the mug away without looking up. I need to go. So early, he sat down opposite, watching her. Looks like DataStream is squeezing you out. Don't start, Michael. Her voice was sharp. I have enough problems without you. Problems? He leaned closer, his tone calm but firm. For example, articles in the news, or that someone knows what you and Frank are doing. Diana froze, her eyes narrowed. Are you on your own again? She stood up, clenching her fists. It's you, right? Are you behind this? Michael looked into her eyes without looking away. I'm just doing my job. And you? What are you hiding? Enough, she almost screamed. You're ruining everything, Michael. My career, my life. For what? For what? He also stood up. His voice became colder. Ask yourself, Diana. Ask Frank. You both knew what you were getting into. She was silent, her lips trembled. Then she grabbed her bag and left, slamming the door. Michael watched her go, feeling pain mixed with determination. He had loved her once, but now he saw only an enemy, and he won't stop. The tension in the office was palpable. Colleagues whispered, avoiding his gaze. Jake, his analyst, walked into the office, closing the door. His face was serious. Boss, did you hear? He asked, lowering his voice. Hart calls an emergency meeting. They say it's about leaks. And about you. Michael nodded, hiding his excitement. What exactly are they saying? Like you're leaking data. Jake shook his head. Like you hacked the system to harm DataStream. This is nonsense, but people believe. Michael clenched his fists under the table. Frank and Diana went all in. They wanted not just to remove him, but to destroy him. Thank you, Jake, he said evenly. Keep your ears open, and don't trust anyone. Got it. Jake left, but his gaze was full of anxiety. Michael opened the laptop and launched the program. He knew that time was short. If Frank accuses him publicly, he needs to get ahead of them. He found a new letter from Frank, sent to Diana. Today at the meeting, we will announce that Williams is the source. The evidence is ready. It's over. The application contained a fabricated log showing that Michael was copying DataStream data. It was a lie, but it looked convincing. Tricky, Michael muttered, saving the file. But he was ready for this. He decided to strike first. His program had already hacked Frank's internal network, not completely, but enough to gain access to his personal files. Michael found a folder of correspondence where Frank discussed partners and tranches. There were names, amounts, dates, everything that proved money laundering. He also found a document where Frank planned to transfer his developments to an outside company for millions. It was irrefutable. Michael clenched his jaw, feeling his anger boil. They didn't just steal his work, they sold it, ruining his life. He copied the files and prepared them for sending. But this time he chose not a niche site, but a large publication with a reputation for whistleblowing. Under an anonymous account through a secure channel, he sent everything: correspondence, translations, evidence. In the message he wrote, "Datastream is a money laundering scheme. Frank Hart and Diana Williams in the center. Check." He pressed send and exhaled. This was his main move. If the publication publishes this, Frank and Diana are finished. But he knew the meeting would be a test. He must hold out until the truth comes out. The meeting took place in the main meeting room. Frank stood at the head of the table, his smile as cold as ice. Diana sat nearby, her face was tense, but she tried to look confident. Michael was the last to enter, feeling the gaze of his colleagues. He sat down in the far corner, keeping his back straight. "Friends," Frank began, his voice loud and authoritative, "we have gathered to discuss a serious problem, data leaks that damage our reputation, and we know who is behind this." He paused, looking at Michael. Everyone turned to him, and Michael felt the air thicken. "Michael Williams," Frank spoke slowly, savoring every word, "head of the security department, a man we trusted, but he betrayed us. We found evidence that he leaked data to frame Datastream." There was silence in the room. Michael looked at Frank without blinking. He saw Diana look down, her hands clenching under the table. She knew it was a lie, but she remained silent. "This is a serious accusation," Michael said, his voice calm but firm. "Where is the evidence?" Frank smiled as if he had been waiting for this. He nodded to the assistant, and logs appeared on the screen, the same ones that were fabricated. "Here," he said. "Your actions, Michael. You copied Datastream data. You wanted to destroy us." Michael looked at the screen, then at Frank. "Interesting," he said, without losing his cool. "Who created these logs? You or one of your partners?" Frank frowned, but quickly pulled himself together. "Don't try to get out. We know the truth, and you will answer for it." "Is it true?" Michael stood up. His eyes were cold. "The truth will come out, Frank, and not in the way you think." He turned and walked out, feeling the eyes of his colleagues burning his back. He knew they believed Frank, but it didn't matter. His move was made. The publication has already received the data, and everything will change soon. In the evening, Michael returned home. Diana was in the living room, sitting on the sofa with a glass of wine. Her eyes were red, as if she had been crying. He stopped in the doorway, looking at her. "Are you satisfied?" he asked, his voice quiet but heavy. "You sat there while he lied about me." And she was silent. "Michael, She looked at him, her voice trembling. "I didn't want this, but you left us no choice." "Choice?" He stepped closer, his anger breaking through. "Diana, you chose him. You chose lies, money, everything, and I was your husband. It's not that simple." She stood up, her eyes shining with tears. "I wanted the best for us. Frank promised that we would be at the top. I didn't know it would go this far. I didn't know." He almost laughed, but the laughter was bitter. "You're lying even now. I saw your letters, Diana. I know everything." She froze, her face turning pale. You hacked us?" I defended myself." He looked into her eyes. "And I'll finish it. You and Frank will pay." She was silent, her shoulders slumped. Then she turned and went upstairs without saying a word. Michael looked after her, feeling like the last thread between them was breaking. He was alone, but that didn't matter. His plan was working, and he was ready to see it through. At night, he checked his mail. The publication responded, "They are publishing the article tomorrow morning." The evidence was too compelling to ignore. Michael closed his laptop and looked out the window. The city was shrouded in gray fog, and the windows of the Quantex Systems office reflected the cold light of the morning. Michael Williams stood by the elevator, adjusting his jacket. His heart beat steadily, but a storm raged inside. Today it will all end. His Operation Phoenix reached a peak. Major media outlets published exposés about DataStream incriminating Frank Hart and Diana of money laundering. Rumors of an FBI investigation were buzzing around town, and Michael knew Frank and Diana were panicking. He held all the cards in his hands, and it was time to make the final move. He entered the meeting room on the 20th floor. Frank and Diana were already there. Frank stood at the window, his face tense, but he tried to maintain his usual confidence. Diana was sitting at the table, her eyes were red, her hands were clutching a folder. She looked broken, but Michael felt no pity. They themselves chose this path. "Michael," Frank turned. His voice was cold, but there was rage in it. "You dare to come? I'm here to finish this." Michael sat down opposite him, his tone calm but firm. "You have problems, Frank, and you know who created them." Frank chuckled, but his smile was forced. "Do you think you are smarter than everyone else? These articles and leaks are your job, right? You dug under us, but it will destroy you." Michael looked at Diana. She was silent, looking down. "Diana," he said quietly, "do you want to say something?" She looked up, her lips trembling. "Michael, I didn't want this to happen. You must understand." "Understand?" He leaned closer. His voice became harsher. "You lied to me, Diana. You and Frank planned to take me out, steal my work, and sell it. And you want me to understand." "That's enough." Frank stepped forward, his eyes sparkling. "You're nobody, Williams. Do you think these articles will change anything? I have connections, money. I'll bury you." Michael smiled, but his smile was cold. "Connections? Money? Frank, you don't understand. I didn't just leak data. I collected everything. Every letter, every transfer, every transaction you make. And the FBI already has this." Frank froze, his face turning pale. Diana gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. "You're bluffing," Frank said, but his voice wavered. "Do you want to check?" Michael took the flash drive out of his pocket and put it on the table. "Here's a copy of everything. Correspondence where you discuss money laundering. Documents where you sell my systems. The names of your partners. I can send this to agents right now, or what?" Frank clenched his fists. His voice became quieter, but more dangerous. "Do you think you can blackmail me? I'm offering a deal." Michael looked him in the eye. "You both disappear. You leave your assets and leave the country. I'm not handing over evidence. If you refuse, the FBI will get everything today." Diana looked at Frank, her eyes full of fear. "Frank, he's serious," she whispered. "We can't." "Shut up." Frank slammed his palm on the table. "You're nobody, Williams. Do you think I'll be afraid of your threats? I have people who will deal with you. Right now." Michael didn't flinch. "People? Frank, you're late. Do you think I came here without preparation?" Frank stepped towards him, his face contorted with rage. "I will destroy you," he hissed. "You and your pathetic revenge." But he didn't have time to finish. The door to the meeting room swung open and people in dark suits burst into the room. "FBI, nobody moved," one of them shouted, holding a badge. "Frank Hart, Diana Williams, you are under arrest." Diana screamed, her folder fell to the floor. Frank froze, his eyes widening. "This is a mistake," he shouted. "You don't understand who I am." "We know who you are." The agent approached him, taking out handcuffs. "Hands behind your back." Michael stood watching as the agents handcuffed Frank. Diana looked at him, her face wet with tears. "Michael," she whispered, "how could you?" He looked into her eyes, and his voice was cold. "You did this to yourself, Diana. Both of you. Like it if you believe that justice always finds traitors. Subscribe to see how far Michael will go after this victory." The agents led them away, and the meeting room was empty. Michael was left alone, looking at the flash drive on the table. He knew that the FBI received his data yesterday anonymously through a secure channel. The deal was a bluff to see their fear, and he saw. In the evening, Michael sat in his office at home, looking at the city outside the window. The news was abuzz. The arrest of Frank and Diana was a sensation. Quantex was in chaos, but Michael was above suspicion. His program erased all traces, and no one knew he was behind it. He opened his desk drawer and took out their wedding photo. Diana smiled, her eyes sparkled. He looked at the photo for a long time, feeling pain squeezing his chest. He won, but the victory was bitter. 10 years of their life, their love, everything disappeared. He turned the photo over and put it back. His plan worked. Frank and Diana will pay for their crimes. But Michael knew the price was high. He lost not only his wife, but also a part of himself. And now, standing on the threshold of a new life, he felt only cold determination. Operation Phoenix ended, and he was reborn from the ashes. But who did he become? The city woke up under the low winter sun, and its light was reflected in the glass facades of skyscrapers. Michael Williams stood at the window of his house, holding a mug of black coffee. The silence in the house was deafening. Furniture, photographs, traces of his life with Diana still surrounded him, but now it seemed alien. Operation Phoenix was over. Frank Hart and Diana were arrested. Their money laundering schemes were exposed, and Michael's name remained clear. He won, but the victory left only emptiness behind. The news had been buzzing for 3 days. The headlines screamed about corruption at DataStream, about millions gone offshore, about Frank's connections with dubious partners. Diana, his wife, was named as an accomplice. Michael watched the reports, saw her face on the screen pale, with downcast eyes, as she was led away in handcuffs. He expected to feel triumph, but instead he felt only heaviness. 10 years of their marriage, their dreams, their love, everything turned to ashes. He took a sip of coffee, looking out over the city. Quantex was in chaos, but his department continued to operate. Colleagues who had recently whispered about his paranoia now looked at him with respect. Jake, his analyst, was the first to approach him after the arrests, slapping him on the shoulder. "Boss, you knew, right? You were always ahead." Michael just nodded. He couldn't tell the truth. His program erased all traces, and no one knew that he was the one who destroyed Frank and Diana. The morning at the office began with a meeting. The new interim director appointed to replace Frank spoke of restoring trust and a fresh start. Michael sat in the back row, listening with half an ear. His name was cleared. Frank tried to blame him for the leaks, but the evidence turned out to be fake, and anonymous data sent by Michael to the FBI confirmed Frank and Diana's guilt. His colleagues now called him a hero, but he did not feel like one. After the meeting, Jake caught up with him in the hallway. "Boss, are you okay?" he asked, looking worried. "It's like you're not here." "It's okay." Michael forced himself to smile. "There's just a lot to do." "Well, you're cool," Jake grinned. "Everyone says that you saved the company. Maybe now you will be promoted." Michael shrugged. "Let's see." He returned to the office and closed the door. The promotion he had dreamed of now seemed empty. He achieved his goal, but at what cost? His life with Diana, his faith in people, all this disappeared. He opened the desk drawer where their wedding photograph lay, but did not take it out. Instead, he closed the drawer and opened his laptop. Work was the only thing that kept him afloat. At lunch, he went down to the cafe, but for the first time in a long time, he did not look for Diana. Her table was empty, and it hit him harder than he expected. He sat in the corner, ordered coffee, and looked at his colleagues who were discussing the news. Someone mentioned her name, and Michael felt a pang of pain. He remembered their last meeting, her tears, her words. "I didn't want this to happen." Was there any truth to this, or was it another lie? He took out his phone and opened a news site. There was a new article. Diana Williams, from vice president to accused. He flipped through the text, but could not finish reading. Instead, he closed the page and looked out the window. The city lived its own life, but for him everything changed. He was alone, and this loneliness was his choice. "You did what you had to do," he muttered, finishing his coffee. In the evening, he returned home and stopped in the living room. The house seemed too big without her. He walked into the bedroom, where her things were still lying, a dress on a chair, earrings on the nightstand. He took the earrings, the same ones that she called a gift from a client. Now he knew it was Frank. Michael clenched them in his fist, feeling the anger flare up again, but quickly fade away. Anger didn't help anymore. He threw the earrings into the drawer and closed it. He sat on the couch, looking at their wedding photo on the shelf. Memories came flooding back. Their laughter, their nights by the fireplace, their promises to be together. He remembered how she looked at him when they danced at the wedding, how she whispered that she loved him. These moments were real, but now they were poison. He stood up, took the photograph, and put it in the closet. It was time to let go. "You chose, Diana," he said quietly. "Me too." He returned to his office and opened his laptop. His program still worked, but now she was not needed. He began to erase traces of Operation Phoenix, deleting encrypted files, proxies, and logs. This was his last defense. No one would ever know what he did. When he finished, the screen went blank, and Michael felt strangely relieved. He was free. At night, he stood at the window, looking at the city. The victory was his, but it did not bring joy. He lost Diana, he lost their life, he lost a part of himself. Betrayal left scars that will never heal, but he didn't break. He looked to the future with cold determination, knowing that he could start again. He survived like a phoenix, rising from the ashes. But this phoenix was different, lonely, seasoned, ready for any battle. He finished his coffee and put the mug on the windowsill. Tomorrow will be a new day. The spring sun was pouring into the city, reflecting off the glass walls of a new office on the outskirts of the business district. Michael Williams stood at his office window, looking out onto the busy streets below. His new company, Iron Shield, occupied 3 floors of a modern building. 6 months ago, it was just an idea born from the ashes of his past life. Now it was a reality, a cybersecurity firm that had already attracted the attention of large clients and even the government. Michael built it from scratch, and every step was a victory. He turned to the table where the contracts lay, ready to be signed. One of them was an agreement with a government agency that was seeking protection from external threats. Iron Shield offered a solution that the competition couldn't beat, and Michael knew this was just the beginning. His name, cleared after the Quantex scandal, was now associated with reliability and innovation. He became a man who was respected, but no one knew at what cost. Michael sat down in a chair, looking at the photo on the table, not a wedding photo, as before, but a photo of his new team at the opening of the office. Jake, his former analyst from Quantex, stood nearby, grinning. Michael was one of the first to lure him away, knowing that his talent and dedication were priceless. The rest were young, ambitious specialists whom he selected personally. This was his empire, and he built it with cold precision. The morning started with a meeting with the team. Michael entered the conference room where his employees had already gathered. Jake joked as always, waving a marker at the board. "Boss, you're a full 30 seconds late," he grinned. "We have already decided to take over the world without you." "Try it," Michael smiled, sitting down at the head of the table. "But first, let's sort out the contract. What do we have?" "The agency wants a full audit of their systems," answered Lisa, one of the new analysts. "They are impressed with our approach, but asked to speed up the timeline." "Then let's speed it up," Michael nodded. "Jake, you are taking an audit. Lisa, prepare a report for the client. I want them to know that we are the best." The team nodded, and Michael felt a surge of pride. This wasn't Quantex, where intrigue and betrayal lurked around every corner. Here he created a place where integrity and results were valued. But he never forgot the lesson he learned from the past. You can only trust yourself. After the meeting, Jake stayed late. "You've changed, boss," he said, looking at Michael. "You used to be softer or something. Now you're like a machine." "Life teaches you," Michael shrugged, but his eyes were cold. "You don't want me to hand out coffee and hugs to everyone?" "No, but—" Jake hesitated. "Sometimes it just feels like you're carrying the whole world on your shoulders. Maybe you can rest." "Rest can wait," Michael stood up. ending the conversation. We have a contract for $1 million. It's time to work. Jake left and Michael was left alone. He knew Jake was right. He has changed. Diana's betrayal, Frank's lies, the collapse of his old life, all this strengthened him. He was no longer the Michael who believed in people. Now he believed only in his plans and his strength. At lunchtime, he met with a government agency representative at a restaurant nearby. A man in a formal suit with tired eyes extended his hand. "Mr. Williams, your reputation precedes you," he said. "We heard how you dealt with Quantex. This is impressive." "I was just doing my job," Michael smiled, but his tone was reserved. "Iron Shield is ready to protect your systems. We won't let you down." "I believe," the man nodded, "the contract is yours. But tell me, how did you manage? So much noise, and you came out clean." Michael took a sip of water, looking into his eyes. "Luck and preparation," he said, "and a little patience." They discussed the details, and by the end of the meeting the contract was signed. Michael returned to the office, feeling his empire growing. Iron Shield had already beaten several competitors, and word of its success spread quickly. But every time he signed a new contract, he remembered what brought him here. The ashes of his past life were still with him. In the evening, he returned home. The house, once full of Diana's warmth and laughter, was now empty. He sold it a month ago and moved to a new apartment minimalist, with large windows and views of the city. She wasn't here, her traces, only his work and his plans. He opened his laptop, checking the reports. Iron Shield was growing faster than he expected, and it required his full attention. But in the silence of the apartment, he sometimes caught himself thinking about the past, about Diana, about who they were. He learned from the news that her case was still in court, but did not follow the details. She was part of another life, and he didn't want to go back there. Michael Williams stood at the picture window of his top-floor office, looking out at the horizon. His company, which began as an idea in the ruins of his previous life, was now a leader in cybersecurity. Contracts with the government, partnerships with major corporations, a reputation for unsurpassed reliability. He built all this in more than a year. But in this shining success, there was a shadow. Michael was alone, and this loneliness became his armor. He turned to the table where the laptop screen was glowing. Reports, graphs, plans. His world now consisted of numbers and strategies. Iron Shield worked like a perfectly tuned machine, and it was its heart. Every decision, every step was under his control. He made no mistakes, trusted no one but his algorithms and his discipline. People had let him down once, and he wasn't going to repeat that mistake. The morning started with the usual routine. Michael entered the conference room where his team had already gathered. Jake, now his right-hand man, stood at the board, drawing a diagram of a new project. Lisa, the analyst, was leafing through the report, and the rest of the employees were talking, preparing for the discussion. "Good morning," Michael sat at the head of the table, his voice smooth but authoritative. "What do we have?" "New client," Lisa began, opening the presentation. "The bank wants complete protection of their systems. They've heard about us and are willing to pay." "Okay," Michael nodded, looking through the data. "Jake, you are taking an audit. Lisa, prepare a proposal for tomorrow. I want them to sign the contract this week." As always, no rest. Jake grinned, but his tone was respectful. "We'll do it, boss." The team began their discussion, and Michael watched them. They were talented, devoted, but he kept his distance. He valued their work, but not their friendship. Trust was a luxury he could no longer afford. Even Jake, who knew him best, never crossed the invisible line. Michael was their leader, not their friend. After the meeting, Jake stayed late. "Boss, do you ever take a break?" he asked, looking at Michael with slight concern. "We work like hell, but are you even human?" "Human," Michael smiled slightly, but his eyes remained cold. "I just have a goal, and I don't stop." "Got it," Jake nodded, but his gaze was thoughtful. "Just don't forget to live, okay?" Michael didn't answer. He just nodded, ending the conversation. Live? His life was now Iron Shield, his plans, his control. Everything else is the past, which he left in ashes. At lunchtime, he stayed in his office, watching the news. The Quantex scandal had long since died down, but he had seen occasional mentions of Frank and Diana. Frank received a sentence. His name became synonymous with corruption. Diana. Her case was still dragging on, but Michael was not following it. She was part of another life, and he didn't want to go back there. He closed the article and opened the report. Work was his refuge, his way of drowning out the echoes of the past. He remembered their last meeting, her tears, her words. I didn't want this to happen. Sometimes he wondered if there was any truth to it, but it didn't matter. She betrayed him, chose Frank, money, power, and he responded by destroying their world. The victory was his, but it left scars that he bore in silence. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.